Johnson found himself walking home from his part-time job at a diner. M. Marcus was a bright, hardworking kid. A star student at his high school, he was known for his gentle smile and big dreams of becoming an architect. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about blueprints or college. His only concern was getting home safely. Um, the streets were nearly deserted, except for the occasional car slicing through the rain. Marcus pulled his hoodie tighter over his head to shield himself from the cold, unaware that this simple action would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. As Marcus turned onto a quiet residential street, the distant wail of a police siren reached his ears. Moments later, red and blue lights illuminated the rain-soaked pavement behind him. "Stop where you are," a voice commanded through a loudspeaker. Marcus froze, his heart pounding. He turned slowly to see two police officers stepping out of their cruiser. Both had their hands resting on their holsters. Uh, One was of them looking like this, and the other was Rosen. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but filled with confusion. The older officer, a stern-looking man named Officer Bradley, responded, "We got a report about a break-in nearby. You fit the description." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I just got off work," he said, holding up his hands. "I didn't do anything." "Let's see some ID," Bradley demanded. Marcus reached into his pocket slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. He handed over his school ID, which clearly showed his name and age. But Bradley wasn't convinced. "What are you doing out here this late?" he pressed. "I'm walking home," Marcus replied, his voice edged with frustration. "I told you, I just finished my shift." The younger officer, Officer Daniels, stood silently, observing the interaction. Something about Marcus's demeanor didn't align with the idea of a suspect on the run. Despite Marcus's calm explanations, Bradley grew more suspicious. "We're going to need to search you," he said. Marcus hesitated. "Why? I haven't done anything wrong." Bradley's tone hardened. "Do you want to make this harder on yourself?" Feeling cornered, Marcus complied, raising his arms as the officer patted him down. They found nothing, but Bradley's demeanor didn't soften. The situation began to draw the attention of neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. Marcus felt the weight of their stares and the humiliation of being treated like a criminal. "Hold on," Daniels finally spoke up, breaking his silence. "Let's think this through. He doesn't have anything on him, and his story checks out. The ID says he's a student." Bradley frowned but didn't respond. Daniels turned to Marcus. "What's your address? Let me call this in and confirm." Marcus rattled off his address and Daniels made the call. Moments later, dispatch confirmed that Marcus lived just a few blocks away and had no criminal record. Bradley seemed reluctant to let it go, but Daniels stepped forward. "I think we're done here," he said firmly, giving Marcus a small nod of reassurance. As Marcus turned to leave, Daniels called out, "Wait." Marcus stopped, his shoulders tense. "Let me give you a ride home," Daniels offered, his voice softening. At first, Marcus hesitated, unsure if he could trust the gesture, but something in Daniels's eyes told him it was genuine. Reluctantly, he agreed. During the short drive, Daniels broke the silence. "I'm sorry about what happened back there," he said. "Not every officer handles things the way they should." Marcus looked out the window, his voice quiet. "It happens a lot. People see my skin, my hoodie, and they think they know me. They don't." Daniels nodded, his grip tightening on the wheel. "You're right, and that's not fair. But not all of us are like that." For the first time that night, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. The encounter didn't end there. Daniels couldn't shake the feeling of injustice from that night. The next day, he went to his precinct and reported the incident to his superior, calling for more training on implicit bias and de-escalation tactics. Word of the encounter spread through the community. Marcus, with Daniels' support, began speaking at local schools and community centers about his experience. Together, they worked to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. Months later, Marcus received a scholarship to a prestigious architecture program. On the day of his acceptance celebration, Daniel showed up, smiling proudly. "You're going to do great things," he said, shaking Marcus's hand. Marcus smiled back. "So are you, Officer Daniels. Thanks for believing in me." As Daniels watched Marcus celebrate with his family, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. One encounter, one act of understanding had the power to change lives, and he was determined to keep making a difference. It had been 6 months since the rainy night that brought Marcus Johnson and Officer Daniels together. What had started as an uncomfortable encounter on a lonely street had blossomed into an unlikely friendship. For Marcus, Daniels was no longer just an officer in uniform, but a symbol that change within the system was possible. Daniels, too, had been profoundly affected by the incident. As a veteran officer, he had witnessed countless moments of tension between law enforcement and the communities they served. But meeting Marcus had given him a renewed sense of purpose, to be a bridge, not a barrier. Their bond became a story of hope in Atlanta, a city grappling with its share of challenges. But their journey was far from over. One Saturday morning, Marcus received an unexpected call from Daniels. "Marcus," Daniels said, his voice upbeat. "How do you feel about speaking at a community policing forum next month?" Marcus hesitated. Public speaking wasn't exactly his comfort zone. "I don't know, Officer Daniels," he admitted. "What would I even say?" "Say the truth," Daniels replied. "People need to hear your story. They need to know the impact of these moments. And Marcus, call me James. We're friends now." After a moment of reflection, Marcus agreed. He knew this was bigger than him. It was a chance to inspire change. The forum was held in the city's largest auditorium, packed with local leaders, activists, police officers, and families. Marcus stood on stage, nervous but resolute, with James by his side for support. "When I think back to that night," Marcus began, his voice steady but emotional, "I remember feeling small, powerless, like I didn't matter. But one person saw me, not just as a suspect, not just as a kid in a hoodie, but as a human being." He paused, looking directly at James, who nodded encouragingly. "Officer Daniels showed me that even in moments of misunderstanding, we can choose empathy. And that choice can change lives." The audience erupted into applause. But the forum didn't just end with words. Man, you don't even know me." Darius stayed patient. Over time, Malik began to open up. He confessed his dreams of becoming a chef, but admitted he didn't believe it was possible. "Let's make it possible," Darius said. With the help of the Bridge Project, Malik enrolled in a culinary program, eventually landing an internship at a well-known restaurant. Just as the Bridge Project was gaining momentum, tragedy struck. One of the program's participants, a 16-year-old named Andre, was arrested during a routine traffic stop. The incident sparked outrage, with many accusing the officers involved of racial profiling. The media caught wind of the story, and soon the Bridge Project itself was under scrutiny. Darius was furious. Inspired by Marcus and James's story, the community pledged to start new programs, including youth mentorships, bias training for officers, and open dialogues between police and residents. As months turned into years, the changes in Atlanta were undeniable. Marcus and James became regular figures at town halls, schools, and even police training sessions. They shared their story not to point fingers, but to inspire understanding and collaboration. Marcus, now a college student studying architecture, used his newfound platform to advocate for equitable urban design. Cities aren't just buildings and roads, he often said. They're places where people live, love, and grow. And they should reflect fairness and dignity for everyone. James, on the other hand, took a bold step within his precinct. He spearheaded the creation of a new community liaison program where officers worked closely with neighborhoods to rebuild trust. But their journey wasn't without challenges. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Some officers viewed James as a traitor for pushing reforms, while some community members remained skeptical of his intentions. Marcus, too, faced backlash, especially online, where trolls dismissed him as a poster boy for performative activism. One particularly tough day, Marcus vented his frustrations to James. It feels like no matter what we do, some people will always find a reason to hate us. James sighed. You're right, Marcus. Change is hard, and it scares people. But we're not doing this for them. We're doing this for the ones who believe in a better future, even if they don't know it yet. Those words became a mantra for Marcus, fueling his determination to keep going. One evening, Marcus was walking home from a study session when he saw a group of younger teens arguing loudly outside a convenience store. The tension was palpable, and Marcus could see that things were about to escalate. Without hesitation, he stepped in. Hey, what's going on here? He asked, his voice calm but firm. At first, the teens dismissed him, but Marcus's presence and words of reason gradually de-escalated the situation. Eventually, the group dispersed, leaving Marcus shaken but relieved. The next day, Marcus told James about the incident. James smiled proudly. You see, you're already making a difference. You didn't just stop a fight. You showed those kids there's another way. Their story soon caught national attention. News outlets began covering their work, dubbing them the bridge builders of Atlanta. They were invited to speak at conferences, appear on talk shows, and even meet with lawmakers in Washington, D.C. At one such event, Marcus stood before a crowd of thousands, including members of Congress. This isn't just about me and Officer Daniels, but knew he had to stay composed. He called John, who had been watching the news from home. This could ruin everything, Darius said, his voice shaking. No, it won't, John replied firmly. This is exactly why we started this. To face these moments head on. Let's fix this. The story of the bridge project gained national attention. News outlets covered its successes, from Malik's budding culinary career to the drastic reduction in juvenile arrests in the neighborhoods it served. The story of the bridge project gained national attention. News outlets covered its successes, from Malik's budding culinary career to the drastic reduction in juvenile arrests in the neighborhoods it served. Darius and John were invited to speak at a national conference on community policing. Standing on stage together, they shared their journey. Oh, This isn't about heroes or saviors, John said. It's about seeing people, truly seeing them, and believing in their potential, Darius added. We started with a simple idea that one act of kindness can create a ripple effect. And now we're seeing those ripples turn into waves, he said passionately. This is about all of us, about choosing to see each other's humanity, even when it's hard, because that's the only way we'll move forward. His words resonated deeply, sparking new initiatives in cities across the country. Years later, Marcus graduated with honors and opened his own architecture firm, focusing on projects that served underserved communities. James, now retired from the force, continued his advocacy work, mentoring a new generation of officers committed to change. At first, the two men remained close, their bond unshaken by time. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, they stood together at a community event in Atlanta, reflecting on how far they had come. This all started with a handshake, Marcus said, smiling. James laughed. And a lot of hard work. As they looked out at the diverse crowd, young and old, police and civilians, they knew their story had become something much bigger than themselves. It was proof that even in a world filled with division, compassion and courage could light the way forward.